Welcome everybody to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and today we're really fortunate that we have two exceptional industry professionals from Cowgirl Creamery. We have Debra Dickerson and we have Matt Brown joining us today. And very exciting because not only do we have their expertise today and just overall loveliness, we have 4 cheeses that we're going to taste through and pair up. So I'm really excited about getting to those. And Debra and Matt are going to talk about some of the history, some of the things, and some of the cheese making. And of course, the farms that you're supporting when you're buying the cheese. So I'm going to step out here and turn it over to Debra and Matt. Debra, Matt?
Hello, it is really nice to be with you, Michael, and with your guests. So I'm Debra, and Matt's got the blue shirt on, and we are both from Cowgirl Creamery, and I am the Director of Education, and I am just absolutely thrilled to be able to share some information. Not to mention what I'm really thrilled to share with you is some delightful cheese. So Michael's going to make us wait to eat until we tell our story. So perhaps we can start there. Matt, do you want to tell people all of the things that you do?
Thank you, Debra. Again, thank you to Michael. Thank you to this platform to get to connect with folks. It's always a joy for Debra and I to be able to reach out to possibly a new set of ears and to be able to talk cheese and Cowgirl specifically. So thank you for that opportunity. My name is Matt Brown, and I have worn quite a few hats over my nearly 10 years with Cowgirl. I started off in our shops in the Ferry Building of San Francisco, first on our cafe side and later as the head buyer of our cheese shop, a cheese shop at the time that was selling more cheese than many other cheese shops across the world, so a chance to work with a lot of great folks and a lot of great cheeses. But that ultimately led me to the interest of cheese production. So after an apprenticeship at Uplands, making cheese with Andy Hatch, I came back to Cowgirl in the capacity of a cheesemaker, and now currently hold the role of assistant manager of production. So along with my colleague Eric Patterson, we oversee 2 facilities that produce cheese with Cowgirl Creamery, our original in Point Reyes and our newest facility in Petaluma. We have about 30 folks making cheese for us, and a collection of, throughout the season, 7 to 8 different cheeses we produce. So I stay busy with making cheese, all the regulatory issues that come up with our industry, and working with a great team of fellow cheesemakers.
Well, it's a pleasure, Matt, I have to say, to be able to work with you again. We did spend a few short months, I think, behind the retail counter together slinging cheese. Always my favorite place to be, and held in memory at this point in time as we all social distance. But I would love to share with people a little bit about the story of Cowgirl Creamery because we are celebrating this year the 20th anniversary of the creation of Mt Tam. And, oh, excellent. And it's just amazing to me that it has been that long that the cheese has been made. But I think a lot of people have probably heard of, if not spent time with, Sue Conley and Peg Smith, who, when they graduated from college, from University of Tennessee, they were great buds. They jumped in a van, and the story is that they came to California to make great cheese. But I think the truth of the matter was they came to California on a lark to have a good time. And what actually happened was they encountered at that point in 1976, just an amazing explosion of return to the earth and local food movement. Peg spent a lot of time with Alice Waters at Chez Panisse, and there was another woman who was very much involved in creating the idea for Cowgirl Creamery, and that was a woman named Ellen STRAUS. Did you ever meet her, Matt?
I never had the opportunity. No, I unfortunately did not. I've heard a lot of stories. There's an epic amount of stories surrounding the origin story of Cowgirl and all the inspiration. So I've heard a lot of them, but unfortunately never met Ellen.
Well, famous Ellen had a famous son, and his name is Albert Strauss. And Albert was actually, he took the family farm and had it certified organic in 1994. It was certified, and it was actually the first organic dairy farm west of the Mississippi in 1994, which is just absolutely shocking to me.
Yeah.
And encouraged a lot of other dairy farmers in Marin and Sonoma to also become certified organic. And at this point in time now, I think these days, they are, thank you, Michael, they are 80% in Marin and Sonoma County. We're 80%, 85% organic dairy farmers now, which is fantastic. But the picture, and if we can go back one, Michael, that would be excellent. Can we go back one? Yeah, this one. So this is a picture of the barn where we're still making cheese, right, Matt? The Red Hawk is made there?
Correct, yeah. I spent several years exclusively out there making cheese. It is, yeah, not necessarily a relic from the past, but it definitely has its 23 years of cheese making in it. It shows. It's a beautiful little cheese making room. It's everything you need and really nothing more from a cheese making standpoint, as well as houses a beautiful cheese counter and an amazing cantina that takes these local cheeses and other locally grown produce and crafts some amazing food. So yeah, no, it's definitely exciting that it's still, you know, such a destination for so many folks to see where it all got started at the barn.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. And the picture there on that screen was the little creamery that Matt was talking about, where the Red Hawks made, which we're going to taste a little bit later. But I wanted to talk also a little bit about the story of Albert Strauss. So Michael, if you can bring that one up, I think it's next. The picture of Albert and Sue has always been one that's been near and dear to me. And Albert,
I think it's worth noting, Deborah, I wanted to point out,
sure,
you know, you had mentioned that in Sonoma and Marin counties, there has been a huge influx in folks converting to organic ever since the Strauss family farm took their original family to dairy, to organic back in 1994. But it is worth noting that even in a large dairy state in California, you know, at large, there's less than 2% of dairy farming in California is organic. So we in Sonoma and Marin County have created somewhat of a bubble. And it's partly in response to folks like Albert who have grown from that single family farm into a network. You know, as we'll talk about soon, it's just, we consider this our milk shed in Northern California, and we consider it to be different. And I think as we go through and talk a little bit more about Cowgirl's history and the history at large of cheese production in Sonoma Marin County, you know, I think it's a testament to the high quality cheeses being produced there from this incredibly rich history of not only dairy farming, but you know, in the last 30 years, organic dairy farming, and how special it is that we're in this location.
we are indeed very fortunate. The climate is perfect for dairying, and the pastures are magnificent. The climate's good for cows, for cheese, and also for us humans. I consider myself lucky to be here. But I think that Albert came up with a model that I think is quite fascinating, and in collaboration with his mom, who worked hard to make sure that the land wasn't turned into subdivisions. Albert's model was one of collaboration with dairy farmers, and as I understand it, and you'll fill in if I'm off base a little bit here, but he encouraged people to join him and to go into organics, which costs money and takes time. Mm-hmm. But he encouraged them to do so, that he would pay them an increased fee and guarantee that that was a solid fee and would last. And so what happened is people weren't, they didn't have to deal with the fluctuations of the regular
milk market.
Yeah, and so it lent a lot of stability. I think it's hard for farmers and dairy farmers, people in agriculture all over. It's very difficult now with the COVID-19. And we hope we'll come out of that all safe and healthy soon. But I think that Albert had a model that worked, and there's now, I think, 11 dairies that are his organization. So he's done a fine job. And he and Sue, that picture is a fond one, because I always say that, well, Sue and Peg were chefs, and Ellen worked hard to steer them into cheesemaking. If Albert had grown something else, we might be eating something else, or it might have been rice, or who knows. So I thank them all for doing what they're doing, so that we have the wonderful milk that that we have to make our organic products. And Michael, I don't know if you know, but all of the products that Cowgirl Creamery makes are indeed organic, and they're also from single farms. We never mix the milk that we use, because our mission is to celebrate the dairy farmers and their work and their communities. It's really key. If we're going to celebrate their work, we need to showcase their milk, and that means the individual cheeses that we make are from one farm versus another. So from Albert's farm, we do indeed get single source milk. But Matt, you're a biker, right? You're a big biker.
A cyclist, yes.
Okay, a cyclist. Thank you so much. Not a biker, although I can see that.
I don't know if my wife would allow it. We'll get there.
So Michael, if you want to give us that next picture, it is a beautiful, beautiful slide of one of Albert's cows looking over. Did Michael leave us? There we are. It's our milk shed, and you started to talk a little bit about that, Matt, and it's I think worth pointing out that not only are these folks creating incredible organic milk, but many of them have been on this land for generations. And this is really, you know, it's part of their lives, you know, in more ways than one. And they're putting back into it as much as grazing their cows on it. But I know that you have also spent some time with one of the dairy farmers that we work with, Bival Farms. Can you talk a little bit about your work with the dairy farmers and how they, you know, how they are invested in the land in the future through organics?
Yeah, you know, I think you touched on it perfectly, that, you know, our cheese we produce are single source milk sources, which means that when a Mt Tam is produced, it's always produced with milk from just one farm. Large cheese operations will typically, they say, pool or take 1,000 gallons here, 1,000 gallons there, and combine it for somewhat of an ambiguous load of milk, whereas ours is always coming from the same farm and going to the same cheeses. And really that is centered to the relationships that Cowgirl has farmed with these dairy producers. And as we touched on, Debra mentioned this idea of the original bringing in folks to the STRAUS label, you know, confirming and working out a price that was fair for the amount of milk or the effort they were putting into the milk. It's really the same that Cowgirl has perpetuated with our dairy farmers. And so we've worked with the two major farms that we receive milk with for years and years and years. That's important to us. One, it provides you know, a reliable milk source for our cheesemakers. There's something to be said with learning a milk. There's then also the growth opportunity. You know, as a company, we look to grow to provide opportunity for our employees, but equally opportunities are provided to our dairy farmers to be able to grow with us. And then what's important really for Cowgirl in that whole picture is that we're promoting organics at large. So as you mentioned, really the history of dairying, far deeper than the history of organic dairying. And these two families that we work with in particular are the epitome of that. The bivalve dairy that you mentioned, we source our milk for Red Hawk and our fresh cheese program, as well as the Pierce Point we'll taste today. Karen is a 6th generation dairy farmer, and the farm that they're currently milking, about 250 cows on 750 acres overlooking Tamales Bay, was purchased originally by Karen's family in 1973. So they've been there quite some time, almost a drop in the bucket compared to the Tresh Dairy, which is the provider of milk through the STRAUS Family Farms network that we receive milk for our Mt Tam and our Wagon wheel. That family has been farming on the same basically plot of land since 1905 when they immigrated from Switzerland. And I think it's also worth noting that looking at what the status of organics is, the qualification for organics these days is much akin to the way people were farming for generations and generations before the path to mass production really happened in, I would say, the 1980s and early 90s, when there was this need to drive to go back to the organic standards and to create a label to celebrate that. So I think, you know, as you look at what organic means in a way these farmers are farming today underneath the organic label, it really just mimics a storied tradition of the way that they understood that organic farming and not pushing the animals and pushing the land was going to contribute to a fertile future for not only them, but when this whole idea of generational dairying really was in effect and people grew up on the farm and took over the farm, you know, they recognized that these organic practices as they're labeled today were what were going to create the opportunity for the land to sustain them for the long term. So again, really cool to see, you know, Albert really actually, you know, one of the hardest parts of Albert going organic back in 1994 was he had to rewrite the organic code. It was written for dairy practices that occurred in the East Coast, where the snow and rain seasons are much different than we have on the West Coast. And so they really had to reevaluate and reimagine what it meant to be organic. And, you know, again, much of that was just going back to what has been sustainable in the past and what are we already doing. It's just not simply labeled as organic, but what we're recognizing and being able to quantify as good for the land, good for the animals. And as from what we see as a standpoint of cheesemakers, you know, absolutely amazing for the milk quality that we receive. And then the value added product that we're then able to turn that into, you know, in the form of Mt Tam or a wheel of Red Hawk. So, you know, the relationships are key. And I believe that's what's going to hopefully continue on, as you said, Deborah, in these times, the very stressful industry it is to become a dairy farmer or be in dairy farming industry. And I hope it's what's going to be able to be hopefully part of the silver lining that allows people to continue to sustain into the future.
Yeah, let us hope so. The reason I brought you up as a cyclist, sorry, is there's just some beautiful vistas out in Point Reyes on the peninsula, and looking out over those hills, it's absolutely breathtaking. And if it hadn't been for the work of Ellen Strauss and for the establishment of MALT, which is the Marin Agricultural Land Trust, those farms would probably be subdivisions. I think it was in the 40s and 50s, as the population of San Francisco exploded, there were plans to build housing all up the coast
Exactly.
in Venus and beyond. And it was through the work of ardent environmentalists, Ellen Strauss being one and Phyllis Faber being another, that they raised the awareness and were able to create Marin Agricultural Land Trust, which actually has raised money to be able to buy the development rights from the farmers and keep the land in working agricultural landscape for perpetuity. So at that point in time, and I think it was the early to late 90s, and there's still farms that are being converted to malt properties now, but the money that those dairy farmers got for their land in exchange for promising that they wouldn't sell it for a car park, a mall, or a subdivision, they had the opportunity to create value added on their property. And, you know, I'm thinking about the cheeses that we are so fortunate to have in our shop in Point Reyes that come from farmers who are part of that, dairy farmers who are part of that malt opportunity. And I think that Nicasio is one. And
Actually, the bivalve, the family behind bivalve just had conversion of their 750 acres to malt, I believe in the last 18 months. And as you added, for a lot of these folks, not only is it possibly a way for them to be able to finance staying on the farm if possibly the next generation isn't going to be immediately taking on agriculture, but if there is, you know, a next generation or even the current generation looking to take their farm to the next level, whether it be by becoming certified organic, which you mentioned, Deborah, is not only an arduous but financially and expensive system to get into, but also being able to create possibly a value-added product from whatever produce or milk that they may be, you know, agriculturally producing on their property, creating some kind of a creamery or a value-added product plant on their facility. It allows them to take their milk or whatever their original agricultural product is and elevate it, thus creating more sustainability by having a value-added product they can bring to market. I think, yeah, malt has been absolutely fundamental. And again, definitely encouraging folks to not only head out to Point Reyes to visit us at our shop, but as you mentioned, Deborah, to explore the coastline of Marin and Sonoma counties. And what you'll see, actually, the equivalent of Salt in Sonoma County is very proud signs along these pastures where you'll come across a protected for forever malt sign. And, it's immediate effect of squashing what would have been probably freeways and subdivisions, as you said, in beautiful West Marin, has also now led secondarily this opportunity for folks to not only continue agriculture but elevate it. So yeah, malt still in effect, as you mentioned, still doing some awesome fundraisers we've had the chance as Cowgirl and myself personally to participate in, but the majority of how they continue to help the industry and this kind of area of our state is by helping these family farms take that next step.
I think protecting the land is so key. Once it's gone, it's gone. And it makes me think about, we've talked a little bit about our milk shed, right? Mm-hmm. Which I always think of it like, it is our community. These are the people who we work with and who care for each other. There's a lovely tradition in the Basque region, in between Spain and France. And my understanding of it is that at the top of the mountain, the houses are built around the mountain, and it is your responsibility for centuries upon centuries to always look out for the person on your left. Right? It is your job. Regardless, it's just accepted, right? You always you look after your neighbor on the left, or it might be the right. I can't remember, but it's that sense of pride and ownership. And I think that Cowgirl Creamery has always worked hard to support the creamery, to other creameries, and definitely the dairy farmers. And I think it's the thing that I love the most about agriculture, small producers, but cheese making, because it's what I know, it's where I've spent my time, is that there is very little, there's very little holding back. There's very little, not showing your cards. It's about all boats rise and people help each other. And if there's something to be learned or shared, or if there's a problem, the community tends to come together. And, as you said, people are treating their land and doing dairy farming the way that it's been done for centuries. And I think the communities that depend on those dairy farms and the communities that are built around those small town centers, a lot of them have that same philosophy. And in these times when things are so darn crazy, it's good to see it's taking care of the neighbors. And we certainly do find it in the Point Reyes, where it's such a small town, and to see people come in every day at the shop, or we go into their shop, or the tourists come through to visit and find a place to stay, or don't want to leave, as the case may be. It's lovely. We do have a good picture here, I think, of Kathy Trush and her husband Joe coming up. And again, it's just another picture of some really beautiful landscape. And I do love those cows, I must say. But this picture shows a little bit about the difference in the climate, because we all are experiencing a bit of a climate change, and it is getting warmer here. So you do see the difference between, I think we've got spring on the left-hand side and probably the summer months on the right. But these are their cows, and as you said, they're from Switzerland originally. Their family in the 1870s they established. But this is now another generation. I think there's 6 generations or so that they're still on, and that's their son Joey. Just it's good to see that it's passed on down and valued. And their Mt Tam does indeed start with their cows and their fields and their milk. I have a funny story about the Trushes. You might know it. They're avid environmentalists. Yeah. They really really avid environmentalists, and you know, they've been on the land for so long. And my understanding is the city not far to the northeast of them, at one point in time in the late 90s, wanted to build a sewage reservoir. Doesn't that sound just god awful?
Especially in that area.
In between their two farms.
Yep.
And they fought it, as did many of the dairy farmers at the time. And I also understand that that was where they met the STRAUS family, because everybody was coming out to fight this proposal, and they beat it. But it was, you know, that was the time. That was what you did, is you protected your land. And you can take a stance against things that are wrong, and you can make a change. So when I read about that, and I talked to, I can't remember who it was, someone who was there, it might have been Sue, who had some perspective, Sue Connolly from Cowgirl. It just made me think that, you know, these are lessons we can take today.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it also speaks to, you know, the storied history of dairying and organics. And as you said, the connection that brought the Tresh dairy to STRAUS, and by way of STRAUS to us. You know, yeah, they did, like you had mentioned, really came together when STRAUS helped pick up the fight to fight the city of Santa Rosa for this the sewage reservoir they were proposing, and one, it allowed them to join forces to beat it. As you said, I think the Treshes actually was like in '96 were the Sierra Club's Environmentalist of the Year for winning that battle against the city. But it also was what created the relationship that turned the secondary west of the Mississippi into organic, which was the Tresh family dairy. So
Right.
again, you know, as you mentioned, I think not only dairy farmers, but it's replicated in the artisan cheese producer world too, that, you know, we don't hold back. It's a network of sharing. It's a network of information exchange and troubleshooting. And so I think, you know, it's important to realize that as we kind of started off with, that as people are looking for ways to support things that they believe in, that this is a way to, you know, not only promote continued cheese production for a cheese producer, but, you know, these relationships extend all the way to the land. And by, you know, the common term of voting with your dollar, if you're able to help continue on value-added product like cheese, which is then continuing on the, you know, centuries tradition of organic farming for the milk that's produced into that cheese, you know, it really is a full circle situation. And so another reason to go out there and visit, you know, you can look at a malt protected land and know that agricultural is getting out into the world as food for sale, and by supporting that, you're actually helping to support those families to continue to live on those pieces of land and to continue these age-old traditions. So yeah, the Tresh family farms, they're quite a large swath of land that they farm. They have actually almost 800 Holstein and Jersey and Holstein Jersey mixes that are grazing over 2,500 acres, an absolutely immense amount of organic land. And with that, as you mentioned, their milk is being produced into our Mt Tam and our Wagon wheel. And I think, you know, it took us a while to work with the farm to learn that milk. And I think, as you mentioned, what we do is, you know, we're not in a business to change that milk. What we're really looking to do is to take this milk and not mess it up. It's been treated so well from the time a calf was born to the time the pasture was curated to best feed these animals, that, you know, what we're doing as cheesemakers is really just trying to, if at all possible, elevate those, but really let them shine. And so, you know, as Debra and I have talked over, you know, the years, and then, you know, as of recently with preparing for this presentation to everybody, you know, really the cheeses we have aren't these 2-3-year-old big Goudas or cheddars that you just scream flavor at you. What we really rely on is the subtleness and the quality of these different milk sources. And by learning them over time, continue to make a specific cheese with just one milk. You know, we're not looking to manipulate that milk. We're looking to, again, embellish that milk. And so I think what you're going to find when we start to taste the cheeses is, you know, there's a richness, especially with our triple creams with Red Hawk and Mt Tam. I think Pierce Point that we'll taste today is a good, also a good example of a little bit subtler as in the richness factor, but really still allowing the flavors of the milk to sing. And as cheesemakers, you know, unfortunately, you can make bad cheese with good milk, but you can't make good cheese with bad milk. And so, you know, we're fortunate to start off with that amazing product, but really, yeah, trying to encapsulate that into a cheese that then has the legs to make it to the East Coast or to, you know, a shop in Texas or a shop in Delaware. It's you know, the value added idea of it for us specifically with cheese is we give, in my opinion, you know, a little bit longer of legs for this cheese to live and to get that milk farther out into the, for us, luckily, the nationwide community. What we really started off with, you know, Cowgirl really was Bay Area focused when we started. You know, we were peddling milk and cheeses at farmers markets and really looking to connect with the folks that were starting to, as Deborah mentioned, recognize the importance of knowing where your food came from. So chefs that were at the time progressive in the Bay Area, connecting them with these products, and really growing from there. I mean, I think that is, you know, from the very beginning, we've always not only focused on promoting Cowgirl products, but also working within the network of cheesemakers that we have to collectively, you know, what started off as a snapshot of what West Marin and Sonoma County looked like as far as agricultural producers and extending that out to customers. You know, we now, you know, work with producers from across the country that are like-minded, often, you know, small-sized producers like ourselves, because as we mentioned, that really at this point, you know, there's no competition if we're all getting our products out there, and you know, as much as we do naturally compete with each other and want to be the best, I mean, this whole network of sharing information is always at the utmost forefront of how we communicate with each other in the industry. And so for me, being in cheese for a short amount of time I have compared to Deborah, it's been one of the things that has kept me in cheese, despite the sometimes physical hardships and regulatory hardships and you know, all the things that come with working in a production facility. Is the folks involved, from the farmer to the cheesemonger who is describing the cheeses to the final customer, are passionate, and they're passionate about sustainable agriculture. They're passionate about artisanal cheese. They're passionate about artisan food. And, you know, that passion is something that's worth getting behind as well.
Right, right. Well, you have, you've whet my appetite, Matt. Michael, do you think we can do some tasting? Michael's showing you a picture of our Mt Tam, which is named after Mount Tamalpais. Easily recognizable Mount Tamalpais as you come over the Golden Gate Bridge, headed north to Point Reyes Station to visit. And Mt Tam, hopefully easily recognizable by all in the grocery store or your local cheesemonger shop when you go to visit, or at the farmer's market. Will you just look at how beautiful that piece of cheese is?
Thank you, Deborah.
Can I go on just a moment? Matt made the cheese, so I'm going to brag for him. Oh my God, it's wonderful. This cheese, there we go. This cheese, oh, it is beautiful. And I think it's a perfect age. This cheese, I did the calculation, it's about 32 days old.
Yeah.
I myself am thrilled with Mt Tam always, but this is my favorite age. It is soft and gooey on the rind here. But you see that part right underneath the rind here. There. It's a little bit firm, and the cheese ripens from the rind in. And so you get this lovely, buttery, oh my goodness, lovely soft paste under the rind. And then the center is exactly as it should be, which is a little bit firmer and a little bit tangy. It's a cheese with a heart. Oh my God, I love it. So as it grows older, somewhat like myself, it ripens more and more into the center. And at some point, like 60 days old, it could, right, Matt, it could ripen all the way through. But the flavor contrast and the texture contrast that you get with a cheese like this is amazing. My point being, Mt Tam is good at any age.
I was going to say, yeah, Deborah, I mean, often folks, especially folks who have spent some time in the industry, correlate age profiles with typically firmer, pressed curd, large alpine cheeses that may come out in anywhere like Comte from 3 to 5 months to possibly 3 years, and recognizing that there's the subtle and somewhat actually in your face flavor, texture, aroma changes that happen over time. But I like to say the same thing is happening with our Mt Tam in a much shorter time frame. So you actually get a chance to try possibly a couple of different age profiles in a short amount of time. But just as you pointed out, yes, this cheese, in my opinion as well, is really at its prime. I do with all of my cheeses, especially when it comes to pairings, I do love the contrast and to challenging those textures. But with the Mt Tam, we're able to do that just in itself. And as you said, you are going to get that really quick breakdown, the early breakdown, even at a month old, where the proteins within the paste are being broken down. So you get that really soft, almost iridescent, I don't know, about a 1/4 inch below the rind right now for me. And then that kind of blends into, as you said, a little denser of a center. But the combination of those two things together for me, not only have textural differences, which a lot of people attribute to different ages, but there's also, as you mentioned, that flavor, not contrast per se, but they really, I think, marry well together with a little bit more of the richness coming from the softer section of the Mt Tam. And then, as you said, a little bit more of a brightness, almost a bright acidity or a tangy aspect of the firmer core. For me is, a perfect Mt Tam. And we'll get to the point where it never really will completely run off the plate like other soft, ripened, bloomy cheeses. And that's part in which the way we produce a Mt Tam and the fact that it is an American original, it's very unique and quite different than the way other soft cheeses are produced. So you'll never really see it completely, get to the point of a Windermere or a Harbison where it's spoonable. It's always going to maintain a little bit of integrity in its texture. But when it does have a little bit of a contrast, I agree with you. It's one of my favorites. But this cheese is looking great. Another thing we're really proud of as far as the production of a bloomy rinded cheese, and I'm sure Deborah will mention it because it's always a highlight for her, is really the penicillin rind that we have on our Mt Tam. It's in my opinion, it's just there enough to protect the cheese. A rind really is formulated to be a shield for the inside paste to mature for whatever length of time the cheesemaker is highlighting for this particular product. So it's meant there to protect it. It's necessary. But for most folks, it's not meant to be a chewy portion of the cheese that's stealing the spotlight from what most folks are interested in, which is the paste. So for me, there's no need to differentiate or cut off the rind to enjoy a Mt Tam. It offers a slight bitter component flavor profile wise, a slight textural difference, a little bit more of a firmness to it in the paste, even in the center of the paste. But really it's so minimal that, it's not taking away or detracting anything from the Mt Tam, which is always something I'm so proud of our cheese making team for being able to stay on top of.
One of the things that when we look at serving this cheese is that this is a physically large piece of cheese that you work with. So what I like to do with it is trim it in half, and then you can take this portion, and it's almost like a little vehicle, and then you can bring your own little wedge. So you can have these little mini wedges that are just, you get all the way to the center. And so you have a nice difference. You can see that.
Look.
And you really can enjoy that piece. So a lot of times when you're entertaining, how are you going to do that? So I make everybody kind of do a little work. So with this one, I happen to be pairing this with the Fat Toad Farm Caramel Vanilla Bean. And, because this can really work well with some sweetness to it. And I thought that would be really fun, is having a little bit of that. And then for biscuit, I'm using the Effie's, and this is the cocoa biscuit with coconut. And it's just, this is a decadent dessert. And literally the only thing that you could get more crazy with it is if you pair this up with a dark beer. And this is Cigar City. This is their coconut Marshal Zhukov's Russian Imperial Stout, which has got coconut, it's got backstrap molasses, toffee, cocoa, espresso. And so you think that this cheese would be consumed by it, but the flavors are so out there, rich of the cheese, that they all work really well together, even though I'm able to throw this much at it. It's
Great.
Good of a cheese.
Beautiful. It reminds me of another somewhat surprising pairing that I saw from Deborah recently on our social media feed of root beer, a nice root beer with Mt Tam, and I had yet to try that. Working behind the counter, I've come across many different pairings that some would seem a little bit outlandish, and definitely, you know, chocolate and cheese has its place for sure. But yeah, I've seen a nice root beer with the richness of Mt Tam, creating almost like root beer float in combination was an eye opener. It's always exciting to see.
I was blown away, and it was the foamy, frothy, you know, richness of the root beer against that incredible creaminess of the Mt Tam, and it was sassafras and dark coffee and chocolate were the flavors that came. So it sure did make that root beer a heck of a lot better than it was before.
Yeah.
It worked.
I think that's important. I think recognizing the density of this cheese, you know, I typically, you know, in talking about this session today and pairings and Debra asking questions on my personal preference, working behind the counter, I always felt like it was almost a hurdle for most people to get to the final plate of enjoying a cheese and a beverage or another, you know, artisan charcuterie or whatnot accompaniment, was because they're too worried about it being right or wrong, or is it gonna, you know, their friend's gonna make fun of them. And for me, it's like, make those, you know, something that you enjoy, pair it with something else that you enjoy. And if you don't like it, take away from what you didn't like and move on. But, you know, I think there is, you know, a lot of room for folks to experiment. For dense cheeses like Mt Tam, especially beverage wise, you know, typically a classic pairing is anything with a lot of bubbles. Again, I like to compete against the natural texture of the cheese. So lifting it up with the effervescence of a sparkling wine, or even like a nice Saison beer I love with Mt Tam, especially in the summertime, that has that light kind of fruity background or backbone to it, but then that really bright effervescence to it. So yeah, I mean, I often pride our fresh cheese program on being this kind of down the middle of sweet and savory. Do you want to pair it with a jam and make it sweet, or do you want to pair it, you know, in a breakfast quiche with some cheese and, with some vegetables and bacon? You can really go either way. And Mt Tam, even as a Bloomy Rind triple creme, can do the same thing. We have wild popularity in one of our e-commerce offerings, which is pairing this with some truffles, where we offer this beautiful truffle spread to put into the middle of a Mt Tam. So you cut it open, spread it across, put it back together, and then you can slice it just like you had, Michael, into wedges. And so that savory note is there, and it really, you know, expressed even more strongly with the truffles. But then, yeah, I mean, adding some honey, adding some chocolate like you did, Michael, is another great way to take it to the sweet side, which is, you know, I think the complexity of cheese is not only our own, is always exciting to challenge. So I'll have to try that one though, Michael. It looked like a good dessert. I'm opting the blue cheese honey dessert, but that looks pretty good.
Yes, indeed. And I don't think that we mentioned it in passing, but we should probably make sure that it's clear that our Mt Tam is indeed a triple creme cheese, and it is absolutely rich, and I call it seductive in its flavor profile on your palate. Really, really lovely, and like a cowgirl, right? So it pairs well with most things, and it plays well with other cheeses on a cheese board. So I think it's I consider it to be a cheese for all palates and cheese at all ages. It's a good value. It's a great buy, and it supports our local dairy farmers and the community around when you purchase it. So I'm enjoying mine, and I hope some of your guests, Michael, are enjoying theirs. But we need to move on, and I'm going to forget, so I'm going to say it really quick. Byvale Farm is about 1.5 miles from Point Reyes, where our next cheese is, excuse me, which is the Red Hawk. And the farm belongs to John and Karen Taylor. And Matt has spoken a little bit about them. Aren't you related, Matt?
Yeah, yes. Karen and I are distant cousins. My family grew up in the dairy industry, mostly in Sonoma County, out in Bodega. But yes, the Furlong family and the Bianchinis and Mendozas are all kind of intermixed throughout the many decades of dairy farming out there. But yeah, no, it's interesting. You know, both sides of Karen's family came from dairying. John grew up in an agricultural environment in his youth as well, but he ended up going more on the engineering route. And I think that's what's really cool about the way that Bivalve operates is it's pushing the envelope constantly. John, back after 9/11, reevaluated what his career goals were after losing, I think, a couple of colleagues in World Trade Centers, and wanted to come back home and be closer to his family instead of traveling across the country every other week. And so he and Karen bought the farm in 2006 from Karen's family. Again, they had been on the farm since the early 70s, and they quickly turned into organic. But ever since then, they haven't looked back. They've had many chances to spend time out there with them and their family and learn about the practices. And John really does bring his engineering eyes into dairy farming. Dairy farming, again, historically is still the same as it has generations ago, but John really is utilizing technology in a way that allows him to propel that into the next generation. And so they grow the large proportion of their feed on site. Again, they have about 750 acres as well as a couple other properties in West Marin. So John is really big into his own forage growth, both for the cows in pasture, but then also that he bales for the cows throughout the dry season. He's also incredibly dedicated to his feed program overall, as opposed to other dairy farmers that I've had a chance to spend time with. John really has his cows differentiated in groups, and those groups receive different rations. Most often when folks have their cows come into the milking parlor and they can really control what the cow's eating, in front of them is very specific to kind of where their freshness or either how close they are to giving birth or where they are in their milking cycle. So he really optimizes what's already there, which is the land, the genetics of the cows, and the health of those cows, and then maximizing the forage and the feed that he gives those cows. So having had a chance to make Red Hawk for many years with milk from Bivalve Dairy, continuing on with our fresh cheese and seasonal program, our Pierce Point will taste today as well is made with Bivalve Dairy's milk. It's been a joy. His components, what we look for as a cheesemaker, the fat and the protein are absolutely through the roof on the milk that John and Karen produce, as well as, as again I mentioned, good milk equals good cheese. And for us, beyond components, the cleanliness of the milk, there's so many opportunities for contamination from the general health of the underside of an animal before it gets milk, the respect that the team has for the milking equipment, the bulk tank that goes into, the tanker that brings it to the creamery to be produced in the cheese, and all of those steps along the line. I really feel like Bivalve is optimized, and for what we get then is just absolutely beautiful, clean, uncontaminated milk, organic, that we really, again, just do our best to elevate and to showcase. So beautiful piece of property, again, overlooks and runs all the way down to Tamales Bay. But beyond that, really, I think looking to perpetuate the dairy industry in West Marin to the next level and utilizing technology where able. It's really cool stuff.
He has such a balanced approach, and it comes from the heart. When he spoke to us a while back, we did an interview, and he talks about his cows, and he says, we host them. We host the cows, right? He offers them hospitality, and they're lucky beasts. And this has been a bit hard with him. He's also, he and Karen are making cheese. From their own creamery, so they're working hard to maximize their opportunities. But to me, our Red Hawk is the most intense combination of flavors from a very small geographical area. And when Nick and Sue started the business, they knew that they weren't dairy farmers. They were chefs, right? And instead of trying to learn that skill set, they chose to work with people who were experts in their field as who were in theirs. And we have continued that with you and Eric and the rest of the team and the cheese and making cheese for the company, but also letting the dairy farmers be the very best that they can do by paying them so that they can continue to do their work. But look at this cheese. Where's my screen? There it is. Michael, look at that. Isn't that beautiful?
Absolutely.
It's beautiful. It's got a little bit of white blush. Oh my God, Matt, you got to talk about this one.
Yeah, Red Hawk is again the cheese that I first learned to produce when I came into Cowgirl's production team, and so it always holds a near and dear place to my heart. It also is, to achieve a triple cream, like Michael had mentioned, that both Mt Tam and Red Hawk are falling underneath the categorize of, it's actually a combination of milk and cream added. I spoke about components. People are familiar with low-fat skim milk on the counters at grocery stores. They see the 2%, the 3%. Well, average cow in our milk shed will throughout the season produce anywhere from 3 to 4% butterfat, just natural milk coming out of the animal, where the cream added to what we call the cheese milk in the vat when we make a batch of Red Hawk or Mt Tam is elevated up to about 8.5% butterfat. So
Wow.
what's really cool about this is, as I mentioned, Bivalve's producing the milk that we use to make our fresh cheeses, including cottage cheese. And without diving too deep into that, the curd from cottage cheese is actually skim milk. So we separate the fat out of the milk to make the cottage cheese curd. And then that cream is sent out to Point Reyes, since we make our cottage cheese in Petaluma, and that's added back into bivalve whole milk. So it's actually bivalve cream added into bivalve milk to produce Red Hawk, which I think is, as you mentioned, just a really taste of place. This cheese is, for us in our collection, I think the cheese that screams loudest terroir, this idea of, again, a taste of place, that this cheese is meant to be produced in Point Reyes in that beautiful creamery we saw a photo of in the very first screen. And really, as the story has probably been heard from the bulk of the visitors or listeners out there, this cheese is really, again, yeah, it's a byproduct of being produced in Point Reyes. The red-hued, kind of stickier, tackier mold growth on the outside of the cheese is actually a native culture to Point Reyes. We do not inoculate that into the milk, which often would be done for someone making a wash-grind style cheese in, say, the Midwest, not close to the coast, or added to a wash water where the cheese is washed and then that culture is allowed to grow on the outside. Quite the opposite for us. The small white little blush that you see coming through that red smear mold is a penicillin culture, a culture very similar to the Mt Tam. But when we start washing this cheese in a saltwater solution, we open up the windows of the creamery. They're screened, obviously, to keep out pests. But that cool coastal air for making cheese right along the Tamales Bay, right along the Pacific coast, that climate and the microbes that enjoy that climate really around the world, whether it be the coast of Ireland or the coast of Northern California, are what come in and find this salty, wet rind that we have just washed and start to grow. And really, this is what we utilize, to really possess the unique characteristics of Red Hawk. So for me, Mt Tam, as we talked about, working behind the counter, this is kind of like my introductory cheese. For a lot of folks, especially that are coming new into artisan cheese, again, are worrisome about the vocabulary or jargon they should use. This looks like an artisan cheese by all means, and it has the organic artisan story behind it, but it's still very approachable. As Debra mentioned, it's really a cheese for all ages, a cheese for all palates. It's rich, it's a dreamy texture, and so it's hard pressed to find something not like a Mt Tam. But then once you do like Mt Tam and you're interested in elevating that even further, Red Hawk is the next bet. It's still got the richness, that backbone of a triple cream that complements the then tangy wash rind by having these cultures grow on the outside. Not only are they actually starting to work on the inside, like the rind of Mt Tam, where we see that iridescent edge, we see that similarly on a Red Hawk. They're also imposing the flavors and the aromas that we're looking for to make Red Hawk more unique. For me, wash rind styles of cheese, start on what we see here with the Red Hawk, which I kind of see as a sweet pungency, and then go all the way to that kind of, in my opinion, borderline of what we kind of call barnyardy, or a little bit more on the aggressive flavor profile when it comes to washed rinds, the stinky cheeses per se. So although Red Hawk to the nose has a bit of a strong aroma to it, actually the flavor profile is quite more balanced and lends more to the sweeter pungency side, which I absolutely love. And again, looking at about a 32-day-old cheese, I think Debra had mentioned that all of these soft cheeses we're tasting today are right about that month old. You're starting to see the breakdown in the paste. You're starting to get that soft texture. You're not really getting any ammonia from the rind, which can tend to happen with washed rind styles of cheese when they get too high or too far in their age. And instead, you just get this really well-balanced sweet flavor profile. So I look forward to see possibly what Michael has decided to pair with Red Hawk today, because it, like Mt Tam, can kind of go across the spectrum of pairings. But yeah, definitely, again.
I have to say, sorry to interrupt, but I have to say, Michael, I hope your guests who received the Cowgirl Creamery Deluxe Selection from our amazing e-com folks at Cowgirl Creamery, I hope that they will take the opportunity before they pair with whatever wonderful condiment you've recommended to them. I hope they take a taste of the cheese by itself first, because it is so different than it smells, as Matt said, but it's like, it's so well-mannered. It is a very well-behaved cheese for a washed rind. And I think that the flavor is to test people, to see if they're brave enough to go forward. And I think you mentioned it, Matt, but we can't make any more.
Yeah.
Because
it's,
our
yeah, no, I think that cheese worth celebrating its scarcity, if you will. It's, yeah, as you saw the photo in the very beginning of the very small creamery in which we produce cheese out in Point Reyes. Point Reyes as a community is not on any city sewer system. So instead, all businesses and residences run off of septic systems. And so for us, we're really regulated on the amount of, well, first of all, water coming into the plant. Production facilities, cheese, and many others use a lot of waters. But really more so the water going out. So we have a very specific amount of cheese that we can make that keeps that whole ecosystem of the creamery functioning, basically. And so for us, yeah, it's a cheese we're always looking to expand. You know, again, going with the story of its terroir of Point Reyes, you know, we have tried to mimic it in our Petaluma location, which by sheer size has the ability to produce more cheese. And we just can't mimic, I mean, from even bringing in the brine from Point Reyes, thinking that the cultures might be living in brine, you know, storing wash water out there and bringing it back in. You know, we can't mimic really the rind that's able to form that creates this unique cheese anywhere else besides our Point Reyes location, which is a hindrance to the growth of this cheese and to suffice the demand out there. But again, I think as with all things artisan, worth highlighting and worth celebrating that. You know, if you do find a Red Hawk out there and you're not next to the Bay Area, then you should definitely swoop it up, because it's hard to come by.
It's a really, really lovely cheese. And, you know, sometimes I think we work hard to work in tandem with Mother Nature. And this is an example where we are fortunate enough to have the opportunity in Point Reyes, and let that be what it is for now. So yeah, to not be able to replicate it and to be able to be happy with that, we'll come up with something else. I'm sure of it.
We're working on it.
Michael, what do you got?
I've been a judge at the International Cheese Awards for about 10 years now, and washed rinds have been my primary category that I get to judge in. So I have a love of washed rinds. You know, yesterday I talked with Joey Widmer, who makes the original brick, exactly, and tasting that. And then being able to have the privilege of being able to taste this magnificent washed rind cheese. You know, this is very rich in its flavor and its aroma, but it's not overpowering, and it's very pleasant. There's an earthiness to this that makes it very pleasant. So again, I cut this in a smaller piece. And for this pairing, because it's so rich, that you can really take this to a real entertaining level. And so I'm actually using the Three Little Pigs, their Musa crepes, which is an organic chicken, pork, and wild mushroom mousse that I thought would be really fun with this. And, you know, just adds the additional complexity to it. And I'm using petite toast with it to kind of keep everything together and work with that. So there's also, if you like it to go a little bit, kind of take another direction on this, is that these are their little sweet mini peppers. And I have to say that, you know, this really helps, because you get that, that earthiness, and the sweet peppers here, what they do is they really bring a little bit of tanginess to the earthiness and richness. So it makes it a little, I guess, a little less intense in its earth and a little more broad when it comes to all the flavors. And I'm pairing it up with a Tucher Hefeweizen because I really want to lighten this up a little bit with the wheat flavors, with a little bit of the coriander, with a little bit of the effervescence. So that's you know, where I went with it.
Beautiful.
I think that the Red Hawk also is lovely in anything that you want. I'm a home cook and I'm not a fancy cook. But if you're doing anything with breadcrumbs on top, like a fancy macaroni and cheese, and you've got a little bit of Red Hawk in there and your breadcrumbs on top, and it adds to me the secret ingredient,
Yes.
which is a little dash of Point Reyes.
I concur. I love taking polenta, and I'll cook polenta and then I'll cool it down, typically in a pint glass actually, spread with some olive oil, put it in the fridge, and then I can slice a little polenta pan.
Nice.
And I'll sear them, and then as soon as they're about to come off of the stove, I'll take some slices of Red Hawk and melt the Red Hawk into the polenta. And Red Hawk polenta cakes have won over many a friend and family. It's it's a wonderful addition. It gives, like Michael said, just a little bit more of an earthy backbone. It's obviously a bit of a saltiness from the cheese. Surprisingly enough, Mt Tam and Red Hawk, as long as they're not exposed to extreme heat for too long, actually do melt nicely. I actually quite gluttonous at the creamery. Love a little slab of Mt Tam melted on toast with a hard-boiled egg or soft-boiled egg. But yeah, they're a great addition to. I mean, often folks don't want to cook with these fine cheeses, but if you do end up with some in excess and you have a recipe coming that calls for some cheese, I would definitely say, try adding a little Red Hawk in there. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Magical. Absolutely magical. And you know, a ripe Mt Tam is what I say is a socially acceptable way to eat butter.
Yeah, that is true.
So we're running a little late. I'm sure I've talked too much, but can we just please take a big whiff of this magnificent Pierce Point?
Moving on. Okay, so we have bivalve that also is part of the slides here, if I'm correct. Am I right?
Exactly. Yeah, they support. We make Red Hawk. We just enjoyed at our facility in Point Reyes. It's the only cheese we still make there, again, because one, we're limited with the amount, and two, as we learned, Red Hawk is set to be only produced in Point Reyes due to the magical native microbes that live there to help make Red Hawks its unique characteristics. But we also bring in the beautiful milk from bivalve into our Petaluma facility, and we utilize that milk for our rotating seasonal cheeses. So you may have seen St. Pat the last couple of months. Pierce Point is our beautiful summer cheese. So we're in the heart of Pierce Point time. We'll move into Chimney Rock. Actually, in the creamery, we've started to produce our first Chimney Rocks for the fall. And then Devil's Gulch is our seasonal cheese in the wintertime. And the idea for us is, again, what we talked about, working with these single source milks. We recognize that unlike in other dairy operations where, say, they have a seasonal cheese production and all of the cows come in with calves in the spring and then milk till the fall and then dry off until they have calves again in the spring, that milk source really is changing in butterfat content. In the summertime, it's watered down from eating a lot of really rich grasses that are very high water content because they're growing very quickly from the earth. And then in the wintertime, the cows start to think, hey, my calf's about to go through its first winter, I'm going to add a lot of butter fat into my milk to boost their fat. And so they'll be warm for the winter months. And so as seasonal cheese operations really highlight the components changing, whereas Northern California dairying really is year-round dairy production. So we see a lot less of that seasonal stopping in the fall, continuing in the spring. If anything, the fall through the spring is when we have our rains and we see the pastures that were needed for beautiful pasture-based milk. So what we highlight in our seasonal collections is both the nuances of the seasons that we recognize as artisanal producers, but also highlighting things that we're finding in the pasture. So as Debra mentioned, the nose is the first place to go with the Pierce Point because what we have on the outside, a collection of wildflowers, calendula, chamomile, definitely some Thai basil you're gonna get, is what we find out in the pastures of West Marin and Sonoma County. And in fact, almost all of these ingredients being grown in pastures by partners that grow wildflowers, herbs, and produce that we work with. And so the idea for us is the nuance of the flavors of these components in the milk may not be just tasted if you were to have a sip of the milk or even a piece of the paste just by itself. What we really find is by adding these rind coatings. So in the summertime, taking this bloomy rinded cheese from bivalve's milk and then highlighting it with the characteristics that we're finding in the pasture out in West Marin, we accentuate that. Whereas coming from the spring months, hard pressed to not walk through a pasture after a bunch of rain in February and March and not see stinging nettles across creek beds and areas, especially where the cows are less traversing and have the time to grow. And so St. Pat is covered in a beautiful stinging nettle leaf. You can freeze them or blanch them and it takes the sting out. Definitely not a fun field to run through, but after you've done that, you can actually make beautiful pestos out of these leaves. And they're used quite extensively in the culinary world, but we put them on the outside of the cheese for St. Pat. So for me, again, the subtleness of this cheese is flavor profile wise what I get really excited about. I think also worth noting, we're going into a non-triple cream. So there is no cream added to this product. And what you're going to get is a whole milk cheese, again, made, I believe it's about 4% butterfat we're getting from the bivalve milk right now. And so it's not as rich both in texture and in flavor. You still get the breakdown underneath the rind. You still get a little bit more of a solid core to give you that contrast that we like. But for us, it's going to be a little bit more, I guess, bodied to it. It's a little bit more lush in its texture, not necessarily dense, but more, I guess, kind of has a little more kickback to it if you were to squeeze it between your fingers. Yeah, for me, again, really trying to highlight what we're seeing in the pastures to complement the flavors in the milk, albeit subtly. This is one of my favorite seasons, I would say, with the St. Pat is our summer cheese with Pierce Point.
It's really, the texture always surprises me, and I think it speaks to the cheese making, but also to John's milk. But it's a double cream, Matt? Is that the?
It's just it's considered a whole milk. It's so
just
double creams, I believe, you're still going to add some cream. So really quickly, triple creme, double creme, they're all actually delineations that are steeped in law. I mean, the USDA creates these standards, much like butter. There's certain standards that butter is actually butter with the amount of fat content. So a triple cream, if you were to take all the moisture out of it, all the water out of this cheese, which these cheeses are very high moisture cheeses, you're gonna be left with the solids that were inside the milk to make this cheese. Again, those are fat and protein. So for it to be a triple cream, it has to be above 75% butter fat content, whereas a double cream, I believe, is anything over 65. So you would still need to add some cream to make a double cream, whereas this is just utilizing, like what I said, is about a 4% butterfat milk that we're using to make this cheese, as opposed to, again, like I described the Mt Tam, we add cream and boost up to about 8.5% butterfat. So again, you're still rich because, a lot of other milk sources might be closer to the 2.5, 3 range. You're still getting the richness from the extra butterfat found in the milk, but just not as rich of a component as you would find in Red Hawk or Mt Tam.
So, Michael, if any of your guests were dragged down the rabbit hole with that, I did that. My apologies, but I love this stuff, right? It's the cheese geekiness in us. I think at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is the cheese, I'm blown away truthfully by, and thank you, Michael, for inviting us, because we never get to sit down and eat cheese. We're always on the run somewhere, and usually in our homes. And so this is truly a pleasure. But I'm so impressed with the mouthfeel of, and the flavors again are so subtle. I hope you folks will try it. I hope you'll enjoy it and try it and sing the praises of Bivalve Dairy Farm, because it really is, talk about a partnership. The flowers and the Thai basil are just enough to give it a whisper. It's like a little kiss across your cheek. Very nice. Very nice indeed.
See, this is a little more chalkier, and a little more tangier, but that works perfectly with the herbs in here, with all the little flavors that you get with it. This is such a great little afternoon snacking cheese. that, you know, you would just love to be able to share with your friends and that. And when I was thinking about it, because of the herb that you have in this, I really wanted to kind of play on that. So I'm going with a Bonnie's Jams, which is a really interesting strawberry rhubarb. And I really wanted to take that type of fruit with it, because I thought that it would work really well with the flavors of that are on the external, on the rind. And so I also am using the Rustic Bakery, their rosemary and olive oil, because I really wanted to utilize that additional flavor characteristic that you can get from it with that. So I'm kind of hoping that they work, you know, well together. But for beer wise, I've paired this up with the Oscar Blues. This is the Mama's Little Yellow Pills, because I didn't want it to be bigger than the cheese. I wanted it to help me out with cleansing the butter, working with that, and adding a little bit of wheat to it.
Wonderful choice. I love, also, we've had a renaissance of cider producers. We've a rich history also of apple growing in our region, and a resurgence of cider makers. So I love a nice dry cider with these seasonal cheeses as well. Again, it doesn't overpower, like you said, the subtleness of the cheese. I think it ends well with the rind coating, that little herbaceous effect. And then, as you said, kind of wiping the palate clean with that nice dry finish is often what I enjoy pairing with these seasonal cheeses.
Very nice indeed.
This is something you just can't stop eating.
That's exactly what we like to have happen.
After quite a few years of starting with fresh products and then working our way into these soft ripened cheeses like Red Hawk and Mt Tam, and then eventually our seasonal cheeses, I believe it was close to 2009, 2010, forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but we started to look at the next kind of step in cheese making. Making large formatted cheeses that age for a long time is a daunting task for a cheesemaker. To begin with, it necessitates a lot of purchasing of new equipment, as well as these cheeses tend to only come to maturity after 3, 6, if not 9, 12 months. And so if you come to mind all of the input costs of buying the milk, producing the cheese, and then letting it sit in your aging rooms and caring for it, really the production of the cheese is one of the easier things. But working in the aging rooms with these wash grind styles of cheese and flipping them and washing them, you know, wagon wheel 2 to 3 times a week, every single wheel, a cheese being held for, you know, 75 to 100 days like wagon wheel is going to be cared for by hand, you know, over 2 or 3 dozen times. And so it's a big investment. And so Cowgirl, actually at the request of a dear customer of ours who is importing different styles of cheese for her pizzas from Italy and not having an organic alternative made locally, was kind of the catalyst of this wagon wheel that we started to produce. So ideally, it was always meant to be, I think, in its foundation, it was meant to be a cooking cheese. It was meant to be something that melted well. In my opinion, it was meant to be something that, you know, was approachable, much like our Mt Tam. And I think that's definitely where it started. I think it's evolved since then. I think it's held a lot of those, you know, foundational cues. I think it's still a great cooking cheese. I think it's still approachable. You know, a lot of folks, and especially local chefs, will say it's their kids' favorite cheese, and they, you know, cube it up and kids go wild, and that's great. But I think it's also, you know, at this point in time, it's evolved into a really refined table cheese as well. So, you know, I love cooking with wagon wheel, but I think wagon wheel is equally as happy on a cheese plate, you know, holding its own next to, you know, a lot of other, what is called cooked curd and pressed curd cheeses. But I don't know, Deborah, if you want to point out any other facts. I mean, I believe, yeah, the cheese we have in front of us is a great representation of wagon wheel. You know, it does possess some of the qualities that we would find in the classic Alpine styles of cheese when the curds and whey are cooked within the vat. They actually are heated up in temperature. It does add a somewhat nutty backbone to the flavor profile of the eventual cheese. The washed rind on the outside still kind of lends in some not pungent notes, but kind of the qualities you might find in the rind of a Red Hawk, and marries those well with the nutty flavors of the cooking of the curd. And so, again, it's still very, very approachable, but left to linger on the palate, I think you'll find a lot of complexity as the cheese kind of rolls around in your mouth, both by itself as well as, again, you know, these cheeses not being, as I described, incredibly overpowering. They do lend themselves to quite a few different types of pairings, whether it be, again, in dishes and recipes with cooking, or different, you know, beverage pairings you're looking to try them with.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the Wagon Wheel was hard fought. I believe that it was 1 year's worth of make and 52 batches of cheese before it passed the test within the organization that it could be now called its name, which was Wagon Wheel.
Yes.
That it couldn't be named because it wasn't good enough to carry the moniker. So the silkiness of the texture is what I really love, and it holds up really well. I find with all of our cheeses, there is a complexity of flavor that is about subtleness. It's not that strength, it's not a punch, but it carries on a very long conversation with you. It's just, it teases your taste buds, I think. And the Wagon Wheel, I think, does a fine job of really carrying across your palate those warm toasted butter notes with a little bit of like, oh, what was that in the washed rind aspect. It makes the most amazing raclette, amazing raclette.
Yes.
It's
Very
just
much so.
really good. And there's a lot of competition out there, so we want you to share your money with everybody, but please make sure you come home to us. So, Michael, do you have a pairing for this one? Oh, actually, you know what? I'm eating cherries.
Very nice.
And
Good idea.
it's quite tasty. Michael, I'm not sure if you have any magic tucked away there on your board for the Wagon Wheel.
Yes, I do. You know,
Well, of course you do.
When you're working with a cheese that this
Oh, that looks good.
There's so much you can do with this, and a lot of times, you know, I advocate find stuff that you have in your refrigerator. If you got some olives and you got some charcuterie and you got that, throw it in and with the cheese. You don't have to. You know, I have several different types of olives here. This is a Divina Greek olive mix, so it's a lot of different ones. I'm using the company out of Atlanta, Spotted Trotter. This is a cured and dried pork sausage. That's just magnificent. And so I really wanted to utilize the strength of this cheese and the flavor characteristics, you know, by being able to put them together. And then I'm using the Cowgirl, olive oil and sea salt, because that's just the best balance of flavors, because you really don't need anything more. You have this, the olives, the charcuterie. This is a meal. This is like a lunch or even a dinner. There's just so much flavors here. And I'm pairing it with something that has a little bit more strength. And this is Highland Brewery out of Asheville. And this is their Gaelic Ale. And you can see how dark this is, but that's all about malt. It's got a real nice, fresh cleanness to it. And with this, it really helps kind of bring all the flavors. It brings more butter out in the cheese.
Lovely. Ooh, that salami looks awfully good. Yeah. Awfully good indeed. Well, I think that I've had a delightful time, and I can't thank you for inviting us, Michael. We've kept your guests much longer than we anticipated. I hope they're still with us, and I hope they had a good time. And I just would encourage everyone to support your local cheesemakers and your local shops. Small businesses, we really need to stick together right now and to be safe. To be safe. Opportunity really quickly to talk about Victory Cheese, which at this point in time when shops and stores are struggling and people in agriculture are struggling, just to reiterate what Matt said, where you spend your dollars and where, you know, what your money supports is really critical right now. People are on shoestrings and we're all not sure, at least I'm not. My crystal ball is quite foggy right now. But what Victory Cheese is like a marketing organization that supports each small dairy or each small shop or anyone who can collect and send Victory Cheese boxes out into the world with small producers product in it, and it's to focus attention on producers, to get people to focus on what is their local cheese, and to just sort of bring attention and help their money go to those who really need it. With the restaurants being closed and the schools being closed, there's a real logistical issue of getting these amazing, delicate products into the marketplace, with these cheeses being with short shelf lives and they're not traveling well. It's an issue. So look it up online. It's victorycheese.com. It's a good organization. A lot of the cheese guilds are involved, as well as the American Cheese Society, and others. But it's just designed to focus attention and get your money where it's needed. Every cheese shop can pick their own selection, but you're supporting not only the cheesemakers, but the cheese shop that you're supporting, or if the cheesemakers are putting together a collection of cheeses themselves, that is also good, just to focus attention. We're doing it through our e-com side of the business, and we have a collection called Good Neighbors, and it's our cheese and 3 others that are within our backyard in our neighborhood. And part of the sale of Victory Cheese all over the country goes to the needy association of your choice. So we donate to the California Artisan Cheese Guild, which has been so helpful to California cheesemakers and retailers as well. It's really a great organization. Last words from you, Matt?
I would say thank you very much.
Expert cheesemaker.
Thank you very much. Yeah, again, Michael, for giving us this spotlight. It's really great. As I said, I guess I was actually mentioned by Debra that, you know, we don't get a lot of times to connect with the folks that are enjoying and getting to try our products. And so having a platform should be able to better describe all the hard work that not only our team of cheesemakers, excuse me, are putting in to elevate the milk into cheese, but again, really highlighting what's important to us, which is this network of dairy farms that we help represent by making cheese out of their milk. You know, is an opportunity for us to showcase their hard work and their dedication to not only a product that they produce, but, you know, the land, and that's all shared by all of us. And so cheese touches on so many different socioeconomical issues, from the way the milk is produced, the land is cared for, to the way, you know, that cheese makes its way through the market. And so you know, I think, yeah, learning more about cheese and starting with your own local cheese producers. What started off in Northern California has exploded across the entire United States, and there's cheese producers in almost every neck of the woods out there. And so start local, and a lot of these folks are wanting to tell their stories, so listen to them and visit them, and most have a shop at their creamery that they sell their own cheeses at, and branch out from there, because it is really a community of really passionate folks who are interested in making really high quality food products here to share with their communities. So yeah, thank you again for all of the support from the folks out there. I hope we were able to entertain and educate you guys a little bit. And we appreciate, your continued support of Artisan Cheese and Cowgirl Creamery.
Please come and visit us when you're in the area. And
Absolutely.
wear a mask.
I will. Absolutely. Beautiful. I love that. I love that you got your own cowgirl mask.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you,
very
Matt.
welcome.
Nice to see you.
And I want to thank you both for the information that you gave. It's really nice to be able to hear about the farms, because a lot of times when we're buying cheese, you know, we need to know that it's part of a community, not just a company. So it's really warm in there. But we did have one question. Yep. So Karen had a question wanting to know whether or not the Tish family was part of the STRAUS family.
Great question. Matt, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So as may have been a little bit jumbled, the STRAUS family, STRAUS as a company now is widely known for a lot of their own products that they carry nationwide. from butters to ice cream to the beautiful milk in glass jars. That was all started off a farm called Blake's Landing that, as Deborah mentioned, Ellen Strauss owned. Albert was her son. He converted it to organics back in '94. It all started, the vision started there. Then as Deborah described, that vision spread. The next farm actually ended up getting coupled with the Strauss label was the Trush family dairy, because in the early '90s, they were both fighting against the same sewer development project, came together with like minds and said, hey, well, why don't we basically, bring your milk source into our label, and we'll continue to promote organics and the products we can make and the fluid milk we can produce with our beautiful cows as one label. And basically with their success and their continued growth, there's now 11 or 12 families
11.
that are milking daily, and that milk is getting turned into the Strauss line of products, whether it be ice cream or butters or whatnot, yogurt. So we've connected with the Trush family dairy underneath that cooperative umbrella of networks of farms. So they are, when not giving milk to us, all of their milk goes to the Strauss family co-op in turn for their products. So yes, Trush is a part of the dairy family of Strauss farms, but not necessarily directly related family-wise. So
Right.
in that
Related.
go ahead.
Sorry, related by sweat, but not by blood.
So yeah, we for a long time, as we grew with Albert from the very beginning, we had been getting milk from the Blake's Landing farm. But as I described, one of the success stories of growth within a community of producers and suppliers, when one aspect grows, the other aspect's able to grow with them and be more successful. And so we got to a point, again, the home ranch of the Strauss family creameries in Marshal, it's very limited on its water resources as well. And so they have a very finite amount of milk they can produce. And so it allowed us to open up a new relationship with the Trush family dairy, who had the same fundamentals in dairying that Strauss, we recognize with Strauss as being an advantage. But as I described, they have 750 cows over 2,500 acres of organic pasture. And so as we grew, it was able to realign a relationship with another specific farm with that singular milk source coming to us daily, but an ability for us to continue growing our Mt Tam and our Wagon meal production numbers. So a little bit tricky there, but yeah, one and the same.
It's nice so that there's that kind of flexibility with Strauss, with our relationship with Strauss, that we're able to do that. We're able to take that Trush milk. Sometimes in cooperatives, you can't siphon off a single farm. So it allows us to maintain and grow a relationship as well as continue to make cheese. So it works. Again, it's all interests met, cooperation and collaboration, and that was why Albert started the company. So
yeah.
All right. Well, Karen, I hope that answered your question. So it certainly answered mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
So, we're going to go ahead and close up here, and thank you so much. The cheeses were magnificent as always. I really appreciate all the detail. And for those of you that are watching that didn't get the kit, you can still order these cheeses, and then this will be on my YouTube channel, Michael Landis Cheese, coming up. So we'll be able to see it there.
Wonderful.
Have that available, and of course, you can get all the cheeses through cowgirl.com. So
cowgirlcreamery.com. We are waiting for you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Bye.
week.
Be safe.
all right, I'm going to leave you with the last slide.